Hey folks, Casey here and welcome back to the channel. This week we're going to get started on the Aces EFI installation on my 1961 Willys pickup truck. It should be pretty interesting, so stay tuned.
Previously on Family
Crazy
Guy.
Casey's!
Oh my God. Tell your father not to start the car.
Thank you very much for your service. Jags.
Special Officer Doofy.
No, I'm not going to show you. I saw it on the internet. It has to be true. Don't you love my drawing? Anyway, it's got, looking at here, is the Aces Killshot Master Kit for a small block Chevy. All right, so I've got the MTS tank for my Willys pickup truck that most of you guys are running now because it's one of the better reproduction tanks out there. And I've got Aces tight fit in-tank fuel system. So basically we've got a pump and pickup tube. Got the Aces pickup tube assembly. It's got a 6 AN pump output return line and a vent line built into it. It's got all the fittings underneath here to attach it and a mounting bracket for a fuel pump. And then 255 liter per hour fuel pump. So, hey folks, I'd like to take a quick moment to appeal to you to please hit that like button, comment if anything in this video is intriguing to you, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. That helps me keep the content coming week after week, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get back to the video. I want to be smart about how I install this. When I had this vehicle set up carbureted, the pickup tube is here. This is the front of the tank. So this is the fill going in through the side of the bed. This is the front. This is the sending unit. This is the pickup tube. With the pickup tube all the way in the front, when you're going up a really steep hill, you could have half a tank and all the gas. I mean, you know, it's a four-wheel drive vehicle, right? So I go up some steep stuff. I also go down some steep stuff. It'd be a lot more beneficial to have the pickup in the center of the tank, but fuel level sender goes in like this. And there is no room to turn it around to face forward. That just won't work. So what I've done here, I don't know if you can see it, this fuel sender was pointing straight down, but I've curved it. So it's curving off this way now. That's going to allow me not to put the pickup perfectly centered. It'll be a little bit towards the rear, but it's going to be a lot better than it was. So hopefully I won't have the fuel starvation issues when I'm climbing really steep hills like I was having before. So let me bring you in and kind of show you. I've mapped out where the sender goes. We'll get a better look at this. All right, so no, I did not cut myself. I've used a paint pen here to kind of trace where the sender wants to sit. You know, and it goes something like that. So now with that in place, I can see where I can lay out my ring for the fuel pump to mount. All right, so I've gone ahead and done some measuring side to side. I've laid out a tape line that marks my center line. I find that, you know, a piece of tape makes a nice sharp edge that you can match up down a long length like a gas tank. So now that I've got my center line established, I come in here with my tank ring and I just trace a little hole around the inside. I mark out where my 6 holes along the outside for the pattern are going to go. And then you can bring in and you can trace in between the holes to establish the center point of your circle, just like that. Go ahead and get our sender back out of the way. And there's no going back now. There's the center hole. Let's drill out our pattern. All right, and now that our pattern's laid out, get our tape out of the way. Okay, now we can come in with a 2 1/8 inch diameter hole saw. And run out of batteries. Well, Okay, so it goes without saying that you should vacuum out the tank after you do a bunch of drilling on it, right? Once your holes are set, you basically thread these little screws into the split ring, and this will drop right in and allow you to have threads to bolt your fuel pump assembly onto. Before you do that, you want to get a tape measure and measure the depth of your tank. I've got 9 1/8 inches, basically going right in from the bottom of the tank to the edge, and check it in a few places to make sure it's consistent. 9 1/8. I'm not 100% sure how far down this foam rubber gasket is going to squish. I think I can probably squish it dead flat if I want to. So what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to set the depth of my fuel pump sock right here at 9 1/8 so that it's sitting on the bottom of the tank exactly, and then I'll get my 1/8 of an inch clearance that they want to see by compressing this gasket down to 1/8 of an inch, basically measuring straight from the tank surface down, and then this gasket will then become my clearance. So once you determine that depth, you need to mark out on your tank bracket and on the tank hose where to cut so that everything will land in the right spot. Okay, once you get the fuel pump assembly depth all figured out, you can take the split ring and the countersunk screws that come with it, and you can thread these in. So the split ring just kind of drops in like this. There we go. And then you just, hopefully you guys can see how that works. You just work it in. Once you get it close, you want to kind of switch your grip up, reach your fingers in, and then you just kind of wiggle it around until you find the threads. And it pops up like that. Now, I don't know whether I'm just lucky or good. My holes are off just enough that the tension from the plastic to the threads actually holds this thing in place perfectly. But it's probably a good idea to have your gasket nearby, because the holes in the gasket are a little bit smaller than the threads. And basically the gasket will hold everything in place pretty well. So there we go. Now I just need to cut my fuel tank bracket and pickup hose to length, attach my return hose, and this whole assembly will be ready to drop in. All right, so here's our pickup and fuel pump assembly, fully assembled, ready to go in. It's all set at the correct height. Getting this in is kind of tricky. This big sock filter doesn't want to participate, but basically grab a hold of it and angle it down into this hole. And then once we get close to the end, no idea how that's going to go through that hole. Brute force. Okay, so this is a very tight fit. One word of advice: put a couple of nuts and some washers holding up the split ring from underneath so that you don't push it through, because once you push it through, it becomes a real fight. So you kind of have to like press against the return hose in order to snake the zip ties past the inner ring. But once you do that, it drops right in pretty easily. Then we can go ahead and get our nuts and washers out of the way. And then make sure after all that fighting that your sock filter is still pointing in the right direction. And there it is. Okay. After the pickup assembly is in place, go ahead and evenly tighten down the supplied nuts with lock washers and O-rings. Just verifying that I do still have a little bit of a gap off the bottom of the tank, just barely. And I'm just going like 2 fingers tight. Just enough to evenly compress the gasket all the way around. And that is installed. All right, and we're looking through the fill on the tank now, and you can see the pump and pickup assembly installed. And just behind it, the fuel level sender just out of the way. I think that'll work. All right, we're continuing with the installation. Let's talk oxygen sensor location. This is the driver's side. I feel like I've got just too much going on here to try to wrestle an oxygen sensor into this location. Passenger side is a lot more open. Now the instructions are a little bit contradictory. They say put the oxygen sensor as close to the engine as possible, and then they state that if you're using headers, that the sensor should be 6 to 10 inches behind the header collector. All right, I'm not using headers, but right towards the bottom of that pipe would be 6 inches for my collector, and 10, well, it's already down in this next section down here. So 6 seems about right. I think once again, the best way to do this is going to be to mark it with a pen. And call it right about there. Now luckily, I have a band clamp down there and a flange up here, so I can disconnect this piece of pipe from the exhaust system, take it out to my bench, and weld the bung in. Okay, so we've got the exhaust pipe out of the truck, set up on the bench here with our reference mark aimed straight up so I can drill a hole for the O2 sensor bung. I've also gone ahead and ground the O2 sensor bung a little bit just to have nice clean metal on there, make the weld work a little bit better. My step bit goes to 3/4 of an inch. I'm supposed to drill a 7/8 inch hole. So I'm gonna do 3/4, then I'm gonna have to take it out 1/8 of an inch, either with the die grinder or go see if I can find a 7/8 inch bit in the back of the shop. Let's go ahead and line this sucker up. These uni bits, there we go. These uni bits are pretty good for establishing a hole without a center punch. There we go. I'll switch sides here. All right, so there we have our 7/8 inch hole. Now our O2 sensor bung is flat. See how it sits flat in the center? And then it's got a gap on either side. And I don't want to just lay weld in there and have it chance going in the hole. So I'm actually going to tap the pipe very slightly flat right there. Freiberger and Dulcich and Brule on Engine Masters have proven that doesn't hurt flow substantially. So as you can see, just with a tiny bit of work, I've got a much flatter fit up. Okay. Okay, so one of the things that I want to do with this ACES EFI installation is I want to run a locked out distributor so that the computer can control the timing of the vehicle. One of the critical steps in doing that is setting the motor at 15 degrees before top dead center when you drop the distributor in so that you can lock the distributor out at 15 degrees before top dead center. ACES says that you need a degreed balancer to do this, but that's not totally true. Unfortunately, in my case, stock 283 Chevy, I've got a 6¼ inch diameter balancer, and it only has one mark on it at TDC. But there's an easy way to figure out where 15 degrees before top dead center is, and I'm going to show you how. So I've got a 6.25 inch diameter balancer, right? You guys remember pi? Pi equals 3.14. If you multiply pi by the diameter, you get the circumference. That's the distance around the outside. So 3.14 times 6.25 inches equals 19.625 inches, or 19 5/8 of an inch. Again, that's the distance around the outside. Now, if I take 19.625 inches and I divide that by 360 degrees, I get the distance per degree around my balancer. That number happens to be 0.0545 inches, or 54.5 thousandths of an inch. Again, that is the distance between each degree of advance. And from there, I'm going to multiply that by 15, because I want to set it at 15 degrees before top dead center. And that number is 0.818 inches with a little bit of rounding. So 0.818 inches. If I lay out a piece of masking tape, make a couple of marks on it at 0 and 0.818 inches, then I can lay that piece of tape at TDC, and where that second mark is, like that, is going to be 15 degrees before top dead center. If I set that up, line it up with the 0 mark on my timing pointer, Bob's your uncle. I can drop my distributor in and lock it out. Hope that's helpful if you guys are doing this install on a vehicle with a stock balancer that is not degreed. You need your diameter times pi divided by 360 times 15 degrees.
Okay, so it might be a little bit hard to see in here, but there's a red mark on my balancer. That is my TDC mark. you can see that I've drawn one line in red that I've lined up with the TDC mark. Then on a flat surface, I measured out 0.818 inches and made a second mark. And I've got that mark lined up with the 0 mark right there, that line right there on my indicator. So my balancer is at 15 degrees before top dead center. There's my distributor. The rotor's pointed at the number 1 position. And now I can pull my old distributor out and put the Aces distributor in.
All right, we're rolling right along here. Let's go ahead and lock out timing on the Aces Blackjack distributor. First things first, we want to come in here and pop the cap off. Get that out of the way, and we can access our rotor. All right, once we get the rotor off, we can see the advance mechanism. They work basically by centrifugal weights that open up as the distributor spins. They're controlled by springs. So I'm gonna grab some needle nose pliers, get in here and just yank these springs off. Just like so. Just like so. Go ahead and remove the bushings at the same time. And then the advance weights should just lift out like that. Like that. So that is the advanced motion that we are looking to lock out of this distributor. All right, once we get the weights off, we want to go ahead and drive out the roll pin in the timing gear. Go ahead and catch it before it falls out and you lose it. Set our gear to the side. And then we've got a couple of shims in here. I want to take note of the orientation of the shims. So we've got a metal shim towards the gear and a bronze shim towards the body. All right. Once we get that out of the way, we can pull the center of our shaft up and out of the way, and we can access this nut. The nut out of the way. Go ahead and get the bushing out of the way. All right, once you get the nut off, you pull the inner shaft up like so, and you can see the big cutout where it's able to advance, right? Pull it out, you spin it 180 degrees, and you push it back in. And that's in a much tighter hole. Hopefully you guys can see that there.
And now when you push the roll pin back in through the bottom, that's going to lock everything in place, and this can no longer advance. But I'm going to go ahead and put the nut back on this post here just to help lock things down even tighter. Basically, I'm going to start it on like that. Run it down most of the way by hand until I start to engage the nylock. Now, if I had a 7mm wrench, this would be a piece of cake, but I do not. So I'm going to use my needle nose pliers. Just get in here and do it a half a turn at a time. All right, so I don't know if you guys can see that, but I actually ended up sticking a little washer in there. And this thing is locked up now, completely tight. No wiggle at all in the advance mechanism. So that is locked out. The only thing left to do is put the gear back on, drive the roll pin through. Gotta roll it around until you line up your hole. Line a roll pin up here. And that's a locked out distributor. Make note when you put the rotor back on. Lovely. Make note when you put the rotor back on that there is a round tab and a square tab that line up in the round and square holes. Like that. Now I gotta go find my screw. All right, so please note that off camera, I had to clearance my clearance a little bit further. The Ace's Blackjack Pro Series Distributor is a little bit larger in diameter than the distributor that I removed. It's about 4 inches. Actually, no, I'm sorry, it's about 3.5 inches, I want to say. And what I pulled out was like 3. So yeah, a little bit tighter. But actually, once it goes in, I have a lot more room. So don't forget your gasket. Super important. Hard, you know, to snake this thing in here, get it all dropped in perfect, and then realize you forgot that. Put a little bit of your favorite grease on the distributor gear teeth, and we're just gonna snake this in here like so. And like I said, it's a little bit of a tight fit. But it goes in like so. And then, you know, you gotta find the sweet spot. And there she is. All right. Yeah, that's perfect. Rotor's point at number 1. So the only thing we have left to do before we set this all up is I need to make sure that one of my oh, come on. I have to make sure that one of my reluctor teeth is pointing directly at the magnet. And that's it right there. So before I put the rotor and cap on, I'm gonna go ahead and lock the distributor down. Okay, here's a little something to be aware of. The Ace's throttle body has these little cutouts in the base pattern, 4150 style flange, right? But it has these little cutouts for the map sensor, and I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe the idle air control or whatever's going up into that side of the carburetor. And so the gaskets have a corresponding cutout. Now this manifold is an old, I believe it's an Edelbrock Torker. It could be a Wyand. It's an early manifold, and it has a very narrow base on it. So as such, when you line up the Ace's gasket here, you actually have a little bit of daylight between the base and the flange. So I'm gonna use a big 4150 style phenolic spacer and a big flat gasket on the bottom. And hopefully this is gonna be robust enough to not have any vacuum leaks. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to look for a more robust spacer to run this manifold. Now, most modern manifolds do tend to have a little bit more meat on them around the flange. And so this is probably a non-issue if you have any sort of modern manifold on your vehicle, but it's just something to be aware of. You don't wanna stick this gasket on, not look super close at it, and end up with a vacuum leak and wonder why the thing isn't running right. All right, and there is the Ace's EFI Classic Gold throttle body installed. Now, I'm even more excited about Ace's throttle assembly. Their billet double return spring throttle assembly. Now, this isn't fully installed yet, but it's close. I believe this is a setup that's meant to use stock style throttle cable, but it works well with a low car universal cable with a little bit of modification. I'm not 100% sure how this is gonna go yet, but check this out. See, I've got a little black dot on my cable marked in line with the throttle lever on the throttle body unit itself. Now, my pedal is all the way up inside the car, and that is the floor right there. And as you can see, I've got more than enough travel on my throttle pedal to achieve full throttle on the throttle body. Low car universal cable, cut to length with a little bit of slack. The slack is important. And then if you guys saw my YouTube short last week, this is my throttle pedal prototype. So this is just a 3D printed part right here. I do plan to make this out of metal. I do have a little bit more tweaking to do. I'd like it to kind of come out at a slight increased angle and maybe be just a hair longer. You can see where the pivot was for the original throttle lever. So to have a little bit more length would be a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, that's just plastic. And you know, if you're making parts and you have a 3D printer, it's pretty nice to be able to print things off. And you know, I've got $1, $2 into this part, and I can test it out in the car and see how it works. And it's gonna be pretty rad. I'm gonna cut it out of aluminum, TIG weld it, and I'm gonna sand cast the pedal pad itself. So yeah.
Anyway, I think that's where I'm going to stop this week's installment. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like button, comment if you like what you've seen in today's video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the finale of the install on this Aces EFI setup and the first fire up with this 61 Willys pickup truck. Thanks so much for watching this week, and we'll see you next time.